Can you play slide guitar on your number one? Let's find out. What if you can't afford another guitar? We don't want to carry two guitars to the gig. Or maybe you're only playing slide on one song, or you're taking a solo on one tune. How can we make this work? Can we play slide on our normal guitar? So what's the real issue here? Why is this a problem? Why can't we just play slide on our normal guitar? The issue is bumping into the frets with the slide and keeping things clean. So the big challenge is that kind of, you're not getting a full note, it's kind of a squashed sounding note and you're bumping into the frets. So there are three factors at play, three main things that we need to look at to consider whether this is even possible. So the first thing is the material of the slide, what's it made of? The next thing is the tension of the strings. And the final thing is the action, the height of the strings above the fret. So we're going to look at all of those, and I'll throw in a few other things along the way as well. So let's start with slide material. You get slides made out of all sorts of weird and wonderful things, but I'm going to focus on three main materials. I've got a brass slide here, I've got a stainless steel one, and I've got a glass slide. And the issue is the weight of them. So the brass slide generally tends to be heavier. They often have a thicker wall to them, and it means that we have more of an issue. I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but more of an issue with this unclear note and the rattling against the frets. The stainless steel slide that I've got is it's got quite a thick wall as well. It's lighter, so I can zip around a bit more. But again, particularly on that first string, I'm not quite getting the sound that I want out of it. And then the final one here is a glass slide. You can get all sorts of glass slides. This one again has a thicker wall, but this tends to kind of float on the strings a little bit differently. Both of these, the glass and the stainless steel ones, I mean, Dunlop do very thin stainless steel ones and thin glass ones. So what's at play here is basically your technique. So when you put the slide on the string, initially it's like an elephant on a tightrope. The string dips enormously because we're so used to pressing down the string when we play. Now with a slide, you just want to use the weight of it. So I've got a very light touch. You have to press down slightly, but it's really just the weight. If you don't press down, then it just kind of doesn't make a clear sound either. So there's a very fine balance where you're just letting the weight push the string down. So rather than this elephant on a tightrope, what we want is, a mouse or maybe a cat just resting on the string, but not dipping it right down into the frets. So the weight of the slide together with your technique is the issue. Now the guitar that I'm using here is the guitar I learned to play slide on. It's just a standard, what is it? It's like an Eric Johnson Strat I got 15 years ago. This is the guitar that I really started learning to play slide on. I'd been dabbling a lot up until that point. It was completely set up. Normally it still is. It's got tens on, kind of low medium action, nothing special about it. And the first few weeks that I was learning seriously to play slide, it was a mess. I was using a very thin Dunlop stainless steel slide, which is a good place to start with if you're starting out, because they weigh nothing. So there's not this issue of a big elephant on the tightrope. It's just that you're pressing too hard. So as my technique started to develop, it became less of an issue, and over time, I just played this guitar as it's set up now, with the slide, no problem at all. So I'm telling you that just to let you know. This is the spoiler alert, but it is possible. But the factors at play here are the material, the weight of the material, and just your technique, really. So the choice of the slide often comes down to who you're inspired by or what you're inspired by. You know, what slide guitar players do you like? What do they use? And also, you know, what sound do you like? What works well with your guitar? As I say, I would advise starting with a thin walled, either stainless steel or glass one, because you'll just find that that makes it a lot simpler to get the sound. The reason we use thicker ones is you get a better tone ultimately. So you kind of might want to graduate up to those, or if you end up, you know, playing slide on other guitars that you've set up specifically for different tunings, then you know that becomes less of an issue. So you can maybe go to a thicker slide. But that's the first thing, the material of the slide. So the next consideration is string tension. The challenge here is that you're going to resist the weight of the slide if you've got thicker strings. You're going to resist it more. And generally you get a better tone as well. So you can go up a gauge maybe. So you could go to 11s from 10s. You could consider tuning to E flat and going up a gauge, and then it wouldn't be a huge difference. On a Les Paul you can do a top wrap, which kind of takes some of the tension out and allows you to put heavier strings on. This is all assuming that you want to stay in standard tuning, of course, because the big thing is when you play in open tunings, you can often you're detuning, which means you can have a thicker string, and it's not going to be as much tension as it would be normally. So you can, you know, put a set of 13s on in open D, and it's going to feel more like 11s in standard tuning, for instance. But for the purposes of this discussion, I'm assuming that you want to play in standard tuning still. What you could do, it's that first string that's the real issue. That's where you get, I'm trying to exaggerate, but that's where you get that kind of bumping. So you could just increase the gauge on that top string. So maybe take the 10 and replace it with an 11 in this set. That's definitely something you could do, and a lot of players do that anyway because they find that top string is just a little bit thin sounding, you know, just for normal playing. But those are some considerations. You know, the string tension is affected by the thickness of the strings and the tuning that you're using. So depending on what you want to do there, you could balance out the weight of the slide somewhat. So the final part of this discussion is to do with the action, the height of the strings off the frets. Now, if you have a super low action, I think you're going to struggle. So I have a low medium action, I'd say. I can still dig in, and normally I wouldn't have the slide on while I'm doing that. But you know, I can still dig in and do vibrato and bends and all that kind of stuff. It's not so low that I can't get any purchase under the string. So if you have a super low action, then I would consider raising it very slightly. The radius of the fretboard comes into play here as well, because if you have a very curved radius, the thing is most slides have a flat surface on them. So you know, if I want to play a chord, it's important that the slide can touch all the strings. So you may consider that maybe, you know, a guitar with a flatter radius is the way to go. Another thing you can do, which I have on a couple of guitars, is I've got the strings at a different radius, at a flatter radius. They're not flat, but they're at a flatter radius. So you know, maybe the radius on the guitar is 7.5, and I've got the strings set to a radius of 12, which means that you know, it's still curved and it still feels like it's following the fretboard somewhat, but it is flatter. You can make adjustments at the bridge and at the nut for that. Another thing you can do is you know, not consider the radius at all, but just kind of take out a little bit of height in the middle here just to flatten off the strings. So that certainly makes it easier when you're trying to play chordal stuff. You know, this hasn't been adjusted like that, but as I say, other guitars I have are like that. So certainly the action affects things, because if we go back to our elephant on the tightrope analogy, if your strings are higher, that tightrope's not going to hit the fretboard in quite the same way. So it's a bit of a balancing act. I mean, Derek Trucks is well known for having a pretty normal setup on his SG. I think there may be a little bit of a tweak going on at the nut just to flatten things out slightly, but basically he's using a regular set of strings with a pretty low action, which enables him to play normal fretted stuff as well as slide stuff. Bear in mind, Derek Trucks is Derek Trucks. Not only is an absolute master, but just going back to what we talked about originally, he's using effectively a Coruscant bottle, the Dwayne Allman thing. So it's a very light slide, not taking away from the fact he's got an incredible touch and is an absolute master. So, but so you may look at someone like that and go, well, he can do it, why can't I? Well, maybe because he's Derek Trucks. But that said, this is possible. You may just have to raise the action slightly and just get used to that. But you can do it without making a massive adjustment to the action. If you want to just do it yourself to start with, you could just take up, on a Strat, just raise the saddles, just say a quarter turn each, see what that feels like. You're going to notice the big difference up here. Up here when you do that, because the strings will be higher here, but they'll still be where they were down there. Have a play around with that perhaps, and see if that helps. Okay, so in summary, the three big things are slide weight, string tension, and the action. I'm going to add one last thing into this, which is something that will help a lot without making any other adjustments, is using overdrive. So if you have some kind of gain, distortion, overdrive, the notes are going to compress and they're going to sustain longer. You could use a compressor pedal for this, I guess, but I certainly find with overdrive I can get away with a lot more on a guitar that's set up pretty normally. So that's certainly something to play around with. It's much harder to do this with a dead clean sound, which is what I'm demonstrating at the moment. So have a play around with that as well and see if that helps. I hope this has helped. I hope this has answered some questions and inspired you to have a go at playing slide with your normal guitar. Let me know in the comments if I can answer any questions. Let me know if there's anything else I can help with, other elements of slide guitar that you're interested in learning more on. Please hit the like button, subscribe, let me know how this is for you, and I'll see you next time.